Hello and welcome back to English class. In today's video we're going to be looking at how to write a report in CPE writing. Okay, so in part 2 of the writing for proficiency you may choose to write a report. Now bear in mind, if you choose to write a report, your language should be impersonal and you should write in a neutral tone. So by doing so, you can include passive structures. So in order to make your report as easy as possible to read, it's recommended also that you include subheadings. Okay, so you have your title and then subheadings before each paragraph. And also bullet points will also help you organize your ideas in a clear and concise way. So let's look at a plan if we were to write a report. Step number 1. Read the task and underline content points. Basically read the task. If you see in the task that you have to include information about a main event, underline it. Maybe you have to present plans for activities, underline it. Or maybe you even have to summarize the status quo, what's actually happening now, underline it. Step number 2, decide the title of the subheadings. Okay, so you can be creative as long as it makes sense and it is in accordance with what the paragraph is about. You'll have no problems. You should not go over 5 paragraphs. Okay, the maximum is 5 paragraphs. Step number 3, what is it you actually want to say? So write this down before it goes out of your head, for example. So it's very important, if you have an idea, write it down instantly. Number 4, these ideas I previously mentioned, write them down and create a brainstorming map, if you like. So write the idea and what sub-ideas can you get from that main idea. This may help you to organize your ideas more clearly. And of course, here's a good opportunity to write down some advanced grammar or vocabulary that you should look to include in your report. Number 5, forms and conventions. Okay, so make sure that you write just so you can remember title, paragraphing, so you know you're going to have a good structure before you even start writing. And number 6, get down to writing. Remember the word limit is from 280 to 320 words. So now we've planned our report, let's look at an example of how we could structure our report. So once we've thought of our title, we write our title, and then we want to start our introduction. So here is where we want to introduce our report. So we could start by saying something like, this report presents, this report summarizes, or even the purpose of this report is to outline, etc., etc. Number 2, the next paragraph is going to be stating our findings. We could start this paragraph with, generally speaking, there are 2, and then you say maybe 2 of the things that the reader needs to be informed about. 2 is just the number that I said. There could be 1, there could be 3, 4. Generally speaking could be a good way to introduce the reader to your first key content points that you're going to address in the report. If that doesn't suit you, you could also start by saying something like, the first point to stress is that, and then you go on and explain. The next paragraph could be, and I repeat, could be, because maybe in not all reports this is the case, state what the main areas of concern are, okay, if necessary. You could start by saying something like, the main area for concern is. Number 4, here is where we're going to give recommendations. It's vital that you give recommendations in your report. And of course that you organize your points in a very coherent and concise way. You could start this paragraph by saying, this report makes 3 recommendations. Firstly, and then you go into the first point or the first recommendation. Or you could just say, it would be highly advisable that, etc., etc. And here you're giving your recommendations. Number 5 is where you're going to conclude with benefits of the recommendations. Okay, so if this person were to take into consideration your recommendations, what would happen? What would be the outcome? You could start by saying, implementing these recommendations would. What would happen if one were to implement these recommendations that you've suggested? Okay, so imagine we were presented with this example task. Now we have to write a report about Following complaints from local residents about students' cars and bikes blocking the street, the principal of your English school has asked you to write a report on the means of transportation students use to reach their classes and the effect this has on traffic circulation outside the school. You should make recommendations for improving the situation. Okay, so if you haven't noted already, I've underlined the key content points, so what we need to include in our report. So let's have a look at how we would start this. So after our title, again, you could be creative with your title as long as it's related to the task. You could start with the first paragraph being too crowded. Okay, it's related to the busy hustle and bustle of mornings or afternoons at school. Okay, so we have the title, too crowded. Okay, maybe the reader's thinking, okay, well, what's this linked to? And then I've started the first paragraph by saying, this report presents the findings of research into the numbers of students who, etc., etc. It examines the impact of. It makes 3 recommendations to improve the situation. So if you like, you could take this start to the report and you can expand on it. Okay, so you can think now for yourselves, what would you write here? The next paragraph, after we've introduced our report, is going to be stating the findings. So here we could start by saying, bad timing is the subheading. Generally speaking, there are 2 periods of time, morning and afternoon. And then we could go on to talk about how or why traffic is so heavy in these time periods, in the morning or in the afternoon, because it's prime time for when students go to college or school or when they leave, okay, and maybe they are being picked up by friends or family, okay, so you can elaborate. Paragraph 3, again, I repeat, not always the case, but we're going to state some areas for concern. I've started with the subheading bad parking. Okay, so before I had bad timing, now I have bad parking. The main area for concern is the safety of school children, etc., etc. I will expand on my point. This could result in, so what is the result of school children and this situation of having cars parked really irresponsibly or whatever the case may be. Another problem is that residents complain that their students' cars block the roads near to the college. Okay, so I've introduced another point, something that the reader should be aware of in relation to this problem. And then finally, the final paragraph is where we're going to give recommendations. So we could start by saying, this report makes 3 recommendations. Firstly, that students living close to the college shouldn't come by car. That's our first recommendation. It's as clear as day. The reader knows exactly what the recommendation is going to be. The first recommendation. Secondly, that and then I leave it to your imagination, what would go after the ellipsis in this example. Have a think. And then finally, the third recommendation, it is proposed that, etc., etc. And then to finish, we could end our report by saying, implementing these recommendations would be beneficial for local residents and school children, as well as college students. Okay, so we've left our reader with a nice thought-provoking line, and hopefully he or she, the reader, will take into consideration our recommendations. Okay, to finish guys, we're just going to look at some key vocabulary. It's something that you should look to include when writing a proficiency report. Number 1 would be looking at using an inversion. Okay, so here we could say, for example, not only is it the situation of bad parking, but also an inverted conditional. Were we to stop this accumulation of traffic, etc., etc. A participle clause, having a great number of cars at the time when students leave could cause, okay, so we could start with a participle clause. We could also start with a double comparative. The more we speak about proficiency writing, the more we learn. A cleft sentence. What is most crucial is that you work for yourself. You watch this video and then you get down to working yourself. Independent learning. Linkers. Nevertheless, one must have a break now and again. Don't work too hard, because if you do, you're not doing yourself any justice. and some impressive verbs. Hopefully by creating this video, it brings about some change in the levels of results of proficiency students. And I wish you the very best when it comes to writing your report, guys. If you have any questions or any further queries, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I'm going to leave you with an example exam task for you to have a go at yourself using the structure that we previously looked at. And without further ado, I'm signing off from English class. See you in the next one. Bye bye for now.